One of the joys of being a biblical counsellor is being asked relationship advice. I wish people would come in earlier and start to evaluate their relationships wisely and early. I often recommend that people have pre-marriage counselling pre-engagement, because once that rings on, that train is running and it's going to be really hard to stop it. But if someone comes in and asks for relationship advice, as in, should I be going out with this guy? Should I marry this guy? It is so tempting to be prescriptive in these situations. Sales trainer Zig Ziglar said, when I hear a story about someone from someone else and there's criticism there, I think, yeah, clearly that person was in the wrong. That's an absolute, that's clear. But then he says he listens to the story from the other person and then he thinks that first person was clearly in the wrong. Be careful not to make judgments if you haven't met both people. But having said that, that may not be possible, but you also may have enough material not to say yes or no to whether they should dump the person or keep going out with them, but certainly to say, here are some issues that you might want to consider that seem to be evident from what you're telling me. And often that takes the form of red flags. Darby Strickland has a very excellent resource called Red Flags in Dating, and I recommend that you look that up and also refer it to young people in particular who are looking at the early stages of relationships. But with regard to these red flags, it helps if you've had a lot of experience seeing relationships that have gone bad. And if you've been counselling for a while, you'll have seen plenty of those things. One of the saddest things that I've learned to ask, or it makes me sad when I ask it, is when did you first realise that you had made the wrong decision? And very often the answer is on the honeymoon, or there were red flags before we were married. You hear very sad stories about why people went through with marriages even though they knew they shouldn't have. They had a feeling in themselves that it was wrong. Sometimes it's guilt related. Perhaps they had had a sexual relationship and then they felt guilty that they had engaged in that relationship and they thought to themselves, well, I've already got involved sexually, perhaps being married will help. And then when they're married and things aren't good, I've also heard women say, I thought that having a baby would help, and then having another baby might help. And none of these things help if the underlying foundation is shaky. So our goal is to stop people who shouldn't be married from getting married. And that can be tough in our culture. There are some Christians who say if you're an eligible male and you know an eligible female, then it's your God-given responsibility to get married and then just work it out. I guess because of the things that I see at the other end of that problem, that is the marriages breaking down, the destructive marriages, I don't agree with that advice. I think you should do your homework before you're married. And I think that if you have doubts, you should not get married. Serious doubts, that is. And those doubts should be adequately resolved with someone else apart from your own resolutions. Someone who has experience. Unfortunately, even then, that's not a watertight way to ensure that you're getting good advice. I know a young woman who found out a week before her wedding that her husband-to-be was in relationships with other women until they were engaged. She had no idea about this. She was so distressed she wanted to call off the wedding. But the pastor said to her, well, you're engaged, it's just as good as being married, so you have to go through with it. Now that's appalling advice. She went through with it. It was a disaster. It could have been avoided from the beginning. We need to be very aware that just being married does not solve the problems that already exist. If you're in doubt, don't. I think that is sound advice for any client that you have. But how do we evaluate that? This issue of red flags. What if you're a young woman who has concerns that you raise with your potential spouse or your boyfriend, and he dismisses those and says, you just need to trust me? What if there's indications that there is some involvement with another woman and his response is, no, you don't have to worry about that, you just need to trust me? What if then he says, you've got trust issues, and if you have any issue with me, then you need to sort out your trust issues? Red flags, obviously. I hope it's obvious. There's so many red flags. Just one more as an example. Dating him is never-ending turmoil. Well, there's a red flag. Why do you think that won't transfer into your marriage? Now, word of warning. You might want to say to someone, get out, end the relationship. But as we mentioned earlier, you don't know anything about the other person that you haven't heard from the concerns and fears of the person in front of you. And you also don't know perhaps enough about the person that you're speaking to give that advice. So the basic rules of counselling still apply. You need to know your person very well. You need to have all the information. And you also don't make decisions for your client. Explore the issues with them. Help them to see them clearly. That is our responsibility as an advisor. Obviously, you would have prayed for God's wisdom and understanding, and obviously that is what they need to continue to do as they evaluate their life with this person. God has called us to be free. He has called us not to be slaves. So try and keep your client aware of the potential that they could become a slave to someone who wants to control them. Look for the red flags. Ask them what they want. Make sure that this decision is not being made lightly. If in doubt, don't. A woman might say to you, I'm in my 30s now. My time is running out. I do want to have babies. I want to have my own children. And this might be my last chance with this guy. Don't let that be their reason for getting married. To put it very bluntly, they might be idolizing having a child, thinking that if they have a child, their life will be fulfilled. But prioritizing anything other than God will not fulfill what it's promising to you, to them. So encourage them to trust God, to ask Him for wisdom, for Him to show them which is the right way to go, and help them to do that. And God willing, should it go ahead, you'll get a photo of the babies when they're born, which is a lovely privilege of being a counsellor, or they break up with much relief and find someone who's actually appropriate. Just another point, just because someone says they're a Christian and a Christian person is on the top of your list, does not mean that they are a Christian. You might need to change your criteria, your number one criteria, to I want someone who is God-focused, where God is the priority, a mature Christian or an eagerly growing Christian who demonstrates that. Not someone who's just got converted yesterday, started love bombing me and made me feel good. The husband's role is to love and nurture and protect his wife. If the guy that she's dating is not doing that, let that be a red flag and get him the help that he may need if he's just naive or immature. And another last point, don't let the idea of being a matchmaker influence you into giving wrong advice. The wedding day can be lovely, but it can also be the doorway to a torturous relationship. And you want to avoid that. Waiting a little longer to evaluate is going to be worth the wait. As always, ask for God's wisdom and guidance before having these conversations. He will help you.